people imprisoned be convinced of their freedom by the illusion of power over the weak? And could they, by disempowering, dispossessing, and disturbing the weak, perpetuate their own enslavement, and by so doing keep themselves in prison? We would leave school for home every day at about the same time. Because we lived in the same neighborhood, my 3 friends and I would accompany each other home, trading jokes, stories, and banter on the way. I'd always look forward to this particular moment in the day, for in addition to being the time when I would leave school for home, it also meant a release from the rules and regulations of a rigid school system while in the company of companions. It was almost as if, for those few precious moments in the day, we were free. Free to be loud, free to be rude, and free to be boys. And so we were on our way home from school one day. We had boarded at our usual stage, alighted at our usual stage, and paid our usual fare. We had crossed the highway en route home and were engaged in typical high school boy banter. You know, cars, sports, food, and chicks. I remember I was making a very fierce and important point about something. But as the words came out of my mouth, I realized that my friends were no longer with me. I mean, physically, they were very much there, but their thoughts and attentions had long diverted. Across the street, a woman walked in our direction, and they stared at her intensely, eyes and jaws wide open, turning their necks back to get a better view. "Did you see that?" one of them shouted. "Ay, ay, 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 that mummy was so fine. Did you see her safaricoms?" Another exclaimed. They soon realized that I was not taking part in the discussion. "My guy," one of them said as he turned to me, "don't tell me you didn't see that chick." The one who was walking across the street. "I mean, she was all right," I responded. My friends were describing this lady as though she were the finest person they had ever seen, and I only saw her as normal and ordinary. To them, something was wrong with me. "You don't think that mummy was hot?" one of them asked. "No," I replied. "Then you must be gay," he shouted. His voice seemed to fade into space and time as the others joined in laughter. I must explain. Being gay went beyond being homosexual. It was no ordinary insult to a young man. It was amongst the worst. In fact, it was amongst the worst that a young man could ever receive. Being gay meant being weak. It meant being a sissy. It meant not being worthy of the company of other men. I felt rage rise from the pits of my stomach as I turned to my friend and pointed my finger and shouted, "I am not gay!" I went home that day with several questions in my mind. Why didn't I stare at that woman? Was I really a man? Was there something wrong with me? I asked these questions with the critical acidity of an insecure adolescent, and they burned and tormented me intensely. That night, at the dinner table, I asked my mother what being a man meant. A man is the provider and protector of his household. As the leader of his family, he must guide his home in the right way. This is what our culture teaches us. This is what the Bible teaches us. And so I went to bed that day determined to frame and model myself in the image of the traditional and religious African man. I would be strong. I would be protective. I would be dominant. But most importantly, I would not be gay. Across Kenya today, homosexuality remains an emotive and divisive issue. Sexuality is in and of itself a taboo topic in many Kenyan households, with the responsibility of sexual instruction left to schools, religious institutions, churches. Sorry, churches are religious institutions. Just for those who didn't know. Peers and the internet. Homosexuality, according to the perspective of most of Kenya's religions and traditional perspectives, is immoral and sinful. The family is the basic unit of society, and these perspectives hold to particular views about the roles and responsibilities of men and women in society. Men are seen as leaders, providers, and protectors, and women are seen as helpers, caregivers, and homemakers. Homosexuality from these perspectives, therefore, is not only immoral and sinful because it breaks religious code and practice, but also dangerous to the basic unit of society, which is the family. As a result, LGBTI people face routine ostracism, harassment, and discrimination. Anti-gay sentiment is popular in the media and amongst politicians and religious leaders who often use anti-gay rhetoric to serve their own purposes and ends. In 2015, the leader of majority in parliament likened homosexuality to terrorism. In 2012, at the coast of Kenya, a mob of 100 youth, led by a cleric, disrupted a conference of LGBTI people and other minorities and threatened to beat anyone who would hold such an event ever again. As a result, the ending result of this is, unfortunate. LGBTI people are forced to lead two lives. One, presumably straight, that they present to the society to keep themselves safe, and the second, their true selves which they hide within. But this can also have a negative impact on the straight, because their ability to express their views is limited to the spectrum accepted by society. It is a system maintained by fear. And out of this fear of ostracism, harassment, and rejection comes a hate and dislike that is directed towards homosexuals. It is a system that encourages the people within it, even though they may hold alternate views, to maintain the line that the society expects of them. And so it was against this backdrop that I stood in my own way against the LGBTI community and homosexuality in my country. Not only out of a belief that such practices were immoral, decadent, and abhorrent, but out of an internal dissatisfaction with myself for never having attained the ideal society had of manhood. I was not, and never could be, strong enough, dominant enough, powerful enough to be a man. In other words, I, and as I came to find out later, several others, needed homophobia as an affirmation of our manhood. And so the dominant views in society reinforced and instilled in me a homophobic attitude and nature towards the LGBTI community. Gay and sexist jokes became routine, and I did what I could to reaffirm my manliness and my sense of power and dominance in my own way. Naturally, change did not come from within the society that had given these ideas to me, but from without. As a student in a foreign country, I would often have fierce debates with my colleagues on homosexuality and gay rights, maintaining consistently my pro-culture, pro-religion, and anti-gay point of view. Until one day, there was a gender and sexuality forum being held on campus. And one of my colleagues encouraged me to just go and see. And so I went. And with folded arms, I sat in the back seats of the conference hall. The forum began, and one after another, the speakers made their presentations. And to my surprise, I found out that they were just like me. Like me, they liked sports and were disappointed when Germany was knocked out of the World Cup. Like me, they liked to travel and to explore. Like me, they had goals, ambitions, and aspirations. But unlike me, their ability to achieve these goals, ambitions, and aspirations was limited to who they were when they were born. Later that day, I attended a friend's leaving party. She was moving house, having come to the end of her school year, and she had organized a get-together of her colleagues from school. And so we went, and because the weather was favorable, we sat outside trading stories. As the weather changed and the sun fell and night began, we made a fire and sat around it. And I'll never forget this. It came to a point when we're sharing stories and narratives and everything. And one gentleman began describing his plans and ambitions for the future. Now, I don't remember exactly what he said, but it went something like, I've been looking forward to this a long time. Actually, my boyfriend and I, and almost immediately my mind went, what? My boyfriend? I looked around and noticed that no one had interrupted. No one had interjected. And the man continued with his narration. Now, instead of feeling outraged, instead of feeling disgusted, I felt for the first time, ladies and gentlemen, that I was in a space in which I could share my perspectives, my emotions, without fear of spite or prejudice from anyone. And almost instantly, I wished that such a space would exist back home. You see, I believe that Kenyans are not against the LGBTI. I believe that through open conversation, we can come together and we can be accepting of differences in perspective, differences in outlook, and even differences in sexual orientation. I was on my way to work with a friend the other day, and she saw a colleague of hers walking on the road. She said, look, do you see that guy? He works in IT in my workplace. I think he's gay. She said it as though it was a disease or some serious internal disorder. I turned to her and I asked, is he friendly and sociable at the workplace? Yes. Is he good at what he does? Yes. Should he be moved for being gay? No. Should he be fired for being gay? No. Should he be deprived of an income or medical assistance or health or education because he is gay? And she said no. What then should we do? And she said we should pray and leave him in peace. I believe that we have the power to frame and model our society according to principles of equity and justice for everyone. We should pull the chair for our gay brothers and sisters. We must sit down and listen to their stories. We must extend a hand of invitation, for if and when we do, then perhaps we'll realize that they are just like us. And that when we see someone being slapped on the street or being kicked out of a cafe or being denied employment, then it is our duty to stand up and speak out against it. And if this fails to work, the answer is not to hurt, to maim, to kill, to deprive, or to discriminate, but to pray and be in peace. And for those of you who despair at the futility of the words I envision, I conclude with the words of Eugene V. Debs, who said, when the mariner sailing over the tropic seas looks for relief from his weary watch, he turns his eyes toward the Southern Cross. As the midnight approaches, the cross begins to bend. The whirling worlds change places, and with starry finger points, the Almighty marks the passage of time upon the dial of the universe. And though no bell may beat the glad tidings, the lookout knows that the midnight is passing and that rest and relief are close at hand. So let the people everywhere take the heart of hope. For the cross is bending, the midnight is passing, and joy cometh in the morning.